we've had an offer to move to a division that's maybe more higher level before, but we talked about it and we were like, we cannot compete.
It was actually kind of interesting because the first time we heard about the UPSL was actually because one of the other teams had reached out to me on Instagram. Somebody who I had never met before, all they saw was my pictures that I posted of me playing goalkeeper. And so he messaged me on Instagram and said, hey, can you come play this weekend?
All right, welcome to the Potros FC podcast. I am Benjamin Uranga. I'm one of the co-founders of Potros FC, and I'm here today with Christopher Uranga. He is my guest. Christopher, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Christopher Uranga. Like Benjamin said, I'm one of the co-founders of the club, and that's pretty much it. I do a lot of other things as well, but I'm sure we're going to get into that in just a minute.
Yeah, so I guess we can just get started, talk a little bit more about ourselves. So I'm Benjamin. I work as a UX designer. I studied design throughout college. And for those who don't know, UX design is a little bit more about research and understanding human behavior as well as the design for kind of the interactions of things. But on the side, I always watch YouTube tutorials for graphic design, Photoshop tutorials, stuff like that. There's a lot of overlap for graphic and UX design just for more of an interest sake. So kind of a self-taught graphic designer, learned a lot in high school and in other classes, but that's what I do for the team. I do a lot of graphic design for the team. I do a lot of content stuff, started to do video editing. So I'm trying to implement that into Potros, and everybody and their mothers have started a podcast, so I said, why not? Let's do it with Potros. So I'm here with my brother, and if he wants to give a more in-depth introduction this time, he's going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so I'm Benjamin's brother. So my professional world, I'm a former high school math teacher. Now I'm a data analyst. Just kind of made the switch over after a couple of years of teaching. Wanted something that challenged me a little bit more, and I have an analytical mind, so I took a Udemy course on data analytics just to kind of get the introduction. I really liked it, so I took a boot camp at Georgia Tech, switched over, changed my career, and I try to bring some of those skills, some of those problem-solving skills to the team. I guess you could say my main role, my main title is like manager. Kind of since we started the club all those years ago, I've been kind of like doing a lot of the administrative stuff, all the registrations, a lot of the financial stuff, as well as like stats keeping, which is something that I kind of just did because I like data and looking at stuff like that. So I just kind of started doing
kind
it.
of a nerd.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. I was a math teacher, so that's pretty
Me
nerdy.
and you both. Yeah.
So mine is more like on the number side and yours is more on the design side, but that's kind of my role with the club. I also played for many years. I kind of took a step back because of my new family member with my new baby. So I'm really happy to have my baby with my wife, and but still involved with the team. And another thing I work on a lot is the live streams. Since I stopped playing, I started putting a lot more focus on the live streams because I feel like it's something that gives us a lot of exposure, and it's something I've enjoyed. I used to work in video production in high school. I was on the video production team in my high school, and I almost went to school to actually study video production. So it's something I've always been interested in. So it's something that I've been learning about and trying to bring to the team to kind of like how you do with the design part of it and running social media and stuff like that. I try to do my own part and trying to like just build up the image of the club. And now we're doing a podcast.
I don't know if that has anything to do with what we both study, but it's fun. So I mean, I realized I didn't really introduce what I do for the club, kind of just talked about stuff outside, but yeah, all I mentioned was I do the graphic design for it, but I'm also a player, assistant manager. Since Christopher's at home for a while, I'm doing all the like on-site administrative stuff, dealing with like rosters, paperwork, being kind of the go-to person that people come to with questions, whether that's referees, people on the other team, people on our team, stuff like that. So me and you kind of do everything. We have like 20 roles within one, but I think we manage it and done well so far. But and if this podcast right now so far feels kind of like an awkward first date, I mean, it's just because it's like this is just introducing. It's the first one. A lot of people don't know us, so we're just kind of getting a little bit know about ourselves, but as we go more episodes, we want to talk into really like into the specifics about the club, like how we run the club, what it takes, what are the things that, and we'll get more into that in this episode as well, but then also like specifics like how we do the social media posts, what applications we use. We can go into the depth of the live streams as well, what software, what equipment, stuff like that. Really just going to be open-ended, talking about all the different things that go into it. Starting pretty high level today just because it's episode 1, but as we go further, we'll go pretty deep into having more focused episodes. And speaking of, I guess we can kind of get started and talk about it. The first topic I wanted to talk about today is, why did we start Potros FC? What's a little bit about the background? And I'll kind of go first. I mean, the very simple answer, less cheesy, I would say, is just that we wanted to keep playing outside of high school. We wanted to keep playing competitive soccer. You played with Georgia Tech after with their club team after high school, and then when I graduated, I was wanting to continue playing, and we didn't have the best experiences in the youth with other clubs. We always thought we could do it better, so we said, why not try it? So me, you, and our dad, we got together and got people from high school and made a team. So that's kind of like the origin stories, the simple answer, but there's a little bit more to it.
It wasn't even just us too, because if you remember that summer, we were just like at the local park. We would just go like a couple times a week with a bunch of friends, and it just kind of like naturally came up because we were like, well, so now what? And everyone was just like, well, why don't we put a team together? And we were like, well, let's look at the options. There was the local like county league that and we were like, well, we've never played there. We don't really know what the level is. I had the experience playing in ADSL with Georgia Tech, so I kind of knew how things ran. Like I was even I wasn't the manager for the team, but there was a time where the manager couldn't go to the meeting, so I went in his place, and so I kind of had an idea of how things worked. I had like kind of that inside view, so we just kind of put it all together, and that's kind of just how it just kind of happened. We were just like, what do we do now? And it just turned into us creating our own club.
Yep. And we had an exact 5-year plan and set, and we knew we would be exactly where we are now. No, not really. Basically, that's kind of how it started. And it was a little bit more than just bringing together people. We learned that pretty quickly. Running a club is not easy. A lot of people think it is. You'll see it at all levels that they'll say like, oh, we have a new team, and it's just players, not much foundation. And I mean, we learned that the hard way, that it is more than just the players. There's different, like, I mentioned this to somebody, it's their staff, no matter what level you are. If you're playing in a local Sunday league and you have to just pay the refs and that's it and just show up and it's like anybody can play, at that point you're an administrator because you're collecting money from the players, you're dealing with somebody, so you have to have staff within the club, even if you're another player or something like that. So I mean, it starts off with something as simple as that, but then you also have to deal with the registration of the players because we're in a little bit more organized than just like a typical Sunday league. But we have to deal with player passes. We have to deal with equipment. We wanted to train. A lot of teams in the league didn't have training, so we wanted to continue with that. And yeah, basically just like a lot of other things. And can you think of anything else that, like, from an administrative standpoint, from when we were in the ADSL Division 2?
Yeah, I think the communication is a big part of it, because you have a group of players, and if you're going to be training, you have to make sure everyone knows where you're going to be training that day, from what time, who's going to be coming to the games, who's not going to be there. And like, for example, we ordered uniforms, and we just got like some generic Adidas uniform and just put our logo on it. And being able to like get everyone's sizes, and then collecting money for that part of it too. And then also communication, not only within your own team, but with other teams. So knowing, what color, coordinating the colors, because sometimes teams, they just show up with one color and that's all they have. And if you don't bring another color and you show up in the same color, now you're in trouble. So, and then finding fields, that's a huge one for games. The league that we joined, you had to have your own field. It wasn't like one location that you just show up to like a lot of other Sunday leagues. This one, you had to provide your own home field. So I think in that first season, we played at like 6 different fields for our home games throughout the season, because we just went to wherever was available.
But yeah, no, talking about the fields, and it doesn't get easier the higher level you
No.
get. I would say, like, even if you have the resources, I would say just finding a soccer field that meets whatever requirement, whatever league that you're in, is pretty difficult. Obviously, the less requirements, the easier it'll be, but it's still, you have to worry about availability, you have to worry about conflicts. If there are soccer goals, then like every youth club wants it as well, so you have to deal
Right.
around that schedule. And
And building a relationship with the place, because if you don't treat it well or you don't do the things that they want you to do, they're not going to want you to come back. And that's why like we
exactly.
found a field for us that's been our home field for like the last 2 or 3 years, and it took us a while to like build that relationship up. And then other teams have come to us and be like, "Oh, how do we get to that field? How can I play in that field?" And we're like, "We don't want to
Good
share that
luck.
information," or like or they've tried to. They're like they reach out and they don't get that field because it took us years of building a relationship to be able to have that facility. So
Yeah.
it's not like it's not just something that you can just go to your local high school and just say, "Hey, I want to here's some money and I want to use this field." No,
Yeah.
they're not just going to let anybody go. You have to have a reputation and all this stuff.
Yeah, and we have to deal with, as well as like with that relationship, the trust of, like, for example, during the fall season, there's no soccer, so they wanted to lock the goals up, and we had to like get that relationship that, like, hey, if you trust us, we'll manage putting the goals back, putting it away. But then it's also that extra step and extra work that other teams don't want to do, like
Right.
just being transparent. Like, we've shown up to fields and we didn't have goals for our warm-ups until like 5 minutes before kickoff because the other team didn't want to move a goal. But like, we are very hard on our players. They always groan and moan when we tell them, hey, you got to move the goals, but they get it done because they know, I mean, it's something that you have to do.
Yeah, it's not something that you can just show up and like for the players they it maybe it seems like they can just show up and everything's fine, but they don't know what we've gone through and all the work that we have to go through to build these relationships. And we know that the alternative, like there were times where we didn't have a field a week before the game and we're like scrambling, emailing like six different places trying to find somewhere that will take us just to play a game. So, and same thing for practices, moving from park to park, looking for space to try to play. And then sometimes there's no lights and then we don't know what to do and it looks really bad on us. So when the players don't do their part, it breaks that years of work that we've put in. So
Yeah.
that's why we have to be very hard on them.
And if any players are watching, yeah, that's why we're strict. We're not mean people. It's just we want the best for the club and the people in it, and it takes a little bit of tough love sometimes. But yeah, and just we've been talking about the administrative side of it, but a little bit more on the soccer side of when we joined that first league in the first season. Kind of long story short, we did pretty decently in our first season for what we had. From a management side, we learned a lot. Obviously, there were issues, some hiccups, but we fixed it. Playing wise, I mean, we didn't have the strongest team, but we still competed, did pretty well. We had tryouts and had a little bit stronger team as well. We were on track to winning the league and getting promoted to the first division. And that's when a little disease came around in 2020. So the season didn't end, and there was like some weird like four-way tie, like tiebreaker that they decided. Even like it was a very strange situation. Some teams like dropped out of the league, so some got more points than others, and it was, even though like it wasn't the certain amount of game, it was something that we were not happy with. And I don't remember the exact details because this was years ago, but we decided like, hey, we're putting in this much effort, we're putting in this much energy, time to make things as good as possible, and we do not see that reciprocated by other teams, other leagues, basically the environment that we were in. And we thought, I think it's time to move to the next level. And we didn't know what that was at the time, but we did our research, we looked into it, and that's when we found out about the UPSL.
And
At the
it
time,
was actually kind of interesting because the first time we heard about the UPSL was actually because one of the other teams had reached out to me on Instagram. Somebody who I had never met before. All they saw was my pictures that I posted of me playing goalkeeper, and they needed a goalkeeper. And so he messaged me on Instagram and said, "Hey, can you come play?" And this weekend, and I went to play, and that was really our first exposure. So it was in our mind because of that. So then when we reached the situation, because that was in the first season for our season, but like at the very end. So at the end, when we went
Yeah.
into the second season and we were looking for other options, we were like, "Hey, remember when I played in that league, the UPSL? Let's look more. Let's learn about what that is." And we kind of went to the website and learned a little bit more of what they're all about. And then we
Yeah.
had
And
a interview with one of the like vice presidents, and he talked to us about like what their vision was and what they were thinking about, and we kind of felt like it was something they was a little bit like more than just that Sunday amateur league. It was like the next level where we could still manage in terms of our resources, but not like just show up and play. It was a little bit more serious, and that's what we were looking for. We said, let's go to that next level.
yeah. And like at the time, just to give a bit of context, it was called the UPSL Caribbean Division. And I remember you were playing for Forest Rovers when in that game when you joined, and it was against Kalanji Pro Profile at the
Yep.
time.
I think we lost
And
like 6-1, I think.
yeah, and I remember I went to go watch the game and seeing. No offense to Forest Rovers, they were a good team, but watching Kalanji, I was like, that is quality soccer. Like those are strong players, those are good players. That's the kind of level that I want to play with. That's the kind of level that I want to like. My teammates, I knew like at the time we had players like Alan Hernandez, Sebas Ramirez, Mark Bino, Sebas Montero. We were like those are the kind of the level that we want to compete. That's how we'll get better as players and as a club. So
And I
seeing
think at
them
that
play,
point, what you were like 19 or 20 maybe at that point.
yeah,
I think you were 19.
I think I was 19 at the time
Yeah,
when
and
I
I
saw
was
that
so
game.
I was like 21 or 22,
Yeah,
and so
and so then
we were
we
still
just
really young.
thought like, yeah, but we thought that we could we thought that we could compete, and having the title of being in the UPSL, we could attract even better players as well. And it happened to be pretty good timing because when we joined, that was when it became the UPSL Georgia division.
Yeah.
Andre got involved. I'm not sure how much he was involved in the Caribbean division at the time, but he did a good job transforming the Georgia division into something a bit more serious and competitive. So it was pretty good timing that we joined at a pretty transitional period in the league. At the time, that first season, there was a lot of work that we had to do. I remember a lot of conversations about people telling us that we are not going to be able to do it, that it's going to be too much, we're in over our heads, and we're going to last. I think somebody even said, like, we're just going to last one season and drop out. Like, that's it. And so we just put our heads down and got to work. And what it's like I said, it's hard to remember, but like, what are some of the things that it took to differently? Like, what did we have to do in the UPSL that we didn't have to do in our previous division?
I think one of the main things was just kind of dealing with knowing that players who are a little bit more serious and their expectations and trying to manage their expectations versus our expectations while also trying to compete. And I think that was one of the biggest shocks because in the previous season, in the previous league in the ADSL, the players were like kind of they were good players, but they were kind of like molding to the environment. They knew it wasn't that serious of a league, and so if they were, I mean, we were beating teams like 5 goals. I remember because I was the goalkeeper. There were games where I barely touched the ball for most of the season. Only like a few games that were like really competitive in that season. So I think a lot of those players went into the UPSL thinking that we were going to be like one of the top teams or that was going to be easy. We had players who came into the club who wanted to play at that high level, but we quickly found out that the level of competition was a huge gap from what we were looking at before. And so
Yeah.
having to manage like the egos because players wanted to play and they wanted to
And
show that they were the best, but we
just
weren't getting
to
results.
just to add to that, like that was the first time we had players that really had like a resume, I would say. Maybe like the level might be comparable because we had players that kind of the whole point was we had players that never really played at a high level that wanted that opportunity and we were
Yeah.
giving that opportunity, but they didn't really have like I played for this, but then we had players come in that played at this college and played at Division 1 here, played in this academy at this level, like stuff like that. And
Right.
that kind of dealing with, and it's not all the players like that, but there are some that have the egos of, because they have that status, they feel that they are above other players.
And not only that, but like you said, a learning curve for us because we came from a league where you could sub out in the first half and sub back in the second half. And in the UPSL, it's 7 subs for the whole game. And I remember our first game in the first half, we missed like 5 opportunities right off the bat, and then we kind of like fell apart defensively. And I think we made like 4 subs in the first half because we were just like, no, this isn't what we're used to. Like, why are we making these mistakes? And we would
Yeah.
change the players, but then we learned quickly that you have to be more patient, and it's like, so like just those little details of like managing the game, managing the players. I think we had this was like the first time that we had to tell players, like, make a call up for the games, because before it was just whoever's available, everyone show up, and most of the time there was always somebody who wasn't available, and we never had to like cut somebody from the
Yeah.
roster. And but now we had like an actual squad where we had every week we had to choose the best 18, and so it was that competition and learning how to manage that. There was a lot of things that we had to learn,
Yeah.
and we learned very quickly that we had to learn because I think we lost our first 5 games.
To be
So
fair, they were tight scores most of the time. Like I think our first game was against Limeño, who was one
yeah,
of the best teams at the time, and it was only 2-1
it was 2-1.
loss. Yeah. So like we were there. We just didn't have like,
The
I would say
experience.
we were one level below the
Yeah,
level that we were supposed to be at. It
yeah.
wasn't like a huge gap, like we were in over our heads like other people had said, but we were definitely not in the same level as the other teams we were competing in.
And it was definitely, a lot of it had to do with experience too, because a lot of those players, as the season went on, by the end of the season, they were picking up the level and competing
Yeah.
by the end of the season and the following seasons as well. And some of
Mhm.
them are still here, and they're like starters, or they playing against the top teams in the state and competing, you know. But it was definitely
Yeah.
just like that first step, getting your toes wet, as they say, like just learning about this is actually what it is and seeing what we needed to do.
Yeah, and it's like, I think part of the big jump with like what you mentioned about making a call up and everything, that me and you, and not having that experience for, is people wanting to be in the club. Like a lot of people wanting to be in the club, because we had like a solid core people in the previous league that were like enjoyed being in the club. Some, obviously a few didn't. And when we made that jump to UPSL and people saw that we were taking it seriously, I think the social media helped a lot, because like there were other teams in the league that didn't even have social media at all, or like they wouldn't even train. They would just bring like very good high quality players, but they would just bring them to the games to play. That we had a lot of people, and I think like we I think that's where our experience, we kind of felt bad cutting people. So we wanted to give like everyone the opportunity, but we realized that like you have to be a little bit more selective at the level, and not just from like a skill perspective, but also from like the attitude and the commitment and other things. And I mean, commitment is something we could have an entire podcast about. That's something we talk about all the time, that we expect from players, and like it's crucial for playing at this division. But yeah, and just kind of segueing over to a little bit more about the current state, like the current day of Potros. Like, what responsibilities do we have running the club?
Um, at least from my perspective, I think one of the biggest things is, now that we've kind of grown so much from where we started, uh, the financial part of it is a big part of it, because in the beginning we weren't really spending a lot of money. The main thing was like uniforms, and then the field rentals and the referee fees. But now we have like a higher expectation of what we do. So we are always looking for ways to try to improve. And like, so like now this season we had the partnership with the gym membership, and then we had we like are always improving our equipment. Now our field expenses have gone up a lot because we have a facility that has more amenities that can help us to try to like give a more professional field and game days. So for me, that's kind of one of the responsibilities now, that is like I want to say that's like my main responsibility to make sure that we can operate as a club. Because if we don't, we personally, me and you, we don't have the resources to run a club on our own.
Yeah.
Um, so or like our family or anything. So we have to make sure that we're managing it, that we can find the sources of income, the sources of revenue in order to continue operating and continue to offer things to our players to help them develop in the best way. And I think that's kind of been one of the biggest responsibilities that we have, is to just keep the club alive. And we
Yeah.
always have different ideas of how to do that, and we've learned a lot over years. I think one of the season, I think the fall of 2021 was our worst season financially, and we changed so much about how we ran the club after that season, because I think we finished like negative $3,000 on the season. We
Yeah.
ended up having to make it up in the like. I mean, I had to pay that out of pocket, and I ended up having to recover that throughout the next seasons. But that was like a big lesson for us to learn how to be more responsible in that part of it. But aside from that, I mean, we have a lot of other responsibilities, like making sure that we're following the rules of the league, because there's so many of them, especially when it comes to
Yeah.
like registration and like transferring players and
I'm
stuff like that.
gonna
So
cut you off there because I want to stick with the financial piece of it a bit more.
yeah,
Yeah, because I mean it's crucial to run a club. I mean, no matter where you are in the world, in the United States, running a club, like I mean, there's always that stigma of like, oh, U.S. soccer is all about money and everything, and to some extent, like, yes, it's true, but also around the entire world, no matter what, if you're going to run a club, you need money. You need to pay for the fields. If you own the fields, you need to pay for the maintenance of the fields. You need to find a way to have your players have uniforms and stuff. And it's like that, all that stuff just doesn't appear out of nowhere. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we get the money, how we acquire the resources to be able to operate our club, because we provide a lot for the players now, like you mentioned, with the gym memberships
mm-hmm.
and uniforms. I'm opening up a team store right now, those kind of things. And like part of the way that we get the income is that, well, first off, our main goal every season is to net zero. We are at the moment, we're not a business. We do not profit anything. Probably like if we actually went into the numbers, we're probably negative. Just like for like things here and there, like I'll occasionally buy equipment just out of my own money, and I won't like ask to be reimbursed by the club. I just like, I'll consider it like, oh, this is just my donation to the club, something
Yeah.
like that. But like
Sometimes it's
small
more
things here and
convenient.
there.
Sometimes it's more
Yeah.
convenient just to do that than to try to work it into the
Yeah.
budget and all that. You know.
And yeah, and also like just like I feel sometimes like I love this club. I just want to give, even if it's something like a little bit at a time like that. But we don't have the resources to pay for like thousands of dollars of registration at a time. Just like, oh, I'll just give a little donation. That's not what I mean. I mean like $20 for some cones or
Right.
something like
Exactly.
that. But the way that we end up zero, because like I mentioned, like registration alone's in the thousands, and that's probably one of the smaller expenses compared to everything that we have per season. Yeah, so some of the ways that we can manage to net zero even with all these expenses is we I mean, the number one thing is player fees. At this level right now, we charge the players a set fee for the season, and that's going to cover like them getting their training jersey, their jacket.
The
They'll have
registration.
uniforms for the games. Yeah, their player registration, the gym membership, all that. So we try to keep that as low as possible. So this season, we had a couple other fundraising like, adventures, I would say. Like we ran that 7v7 tournament at the beginning of the season. That was pretty successful. I think it was a lot of fun and something that we definitely want to do again. But that helped lower the player fees a good bit. We sponsors is another thing. It's again, that could be a whole other podcast topic. That's something very difficult that we struggle with to find sponsors. But it's definitely, that helps a lot as well. Anybody who wants to support the club, and we in turn support them as well, that also reduces the player fees. So basically we figure out how much money we can bring in aside from the player fees at the beginning of the season, and then figure out how much everything's going to cost, and then we just divide that by however many players we're going to have that season, and then we charge the player that much. I think this season we're projected to meet that goal of net zero. So that's pretty good because other seasons it has not been like that. So that's basically our goal, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. And just getting a little bit more into financials, like, do you want to talk a little bit about what kind of things we have to spend money on?
Yeah, so I mean, in a particular season, the main expenses, like the big ones that are going to be the biggest expenses, is the field rentals, the referee fees, the player registrations, and those are like the big three, I would say. For us, we have um, some expenses that are like depending. It's kind of like on the player's decision, like if they want to buy their own uniform or the training jerseys, depending how many players we have to order new jerseys for them. That's also a big cost. And if I'm forgetting something, feel free to remind me because those are the three main ones that I think that any club is going to have. You know, referee fees, field rental fees, and registration.
I
Um,
mean, uniforms is another one. I mean, that could be not every season, but
right. So like
it's
uniforms is a big one, but like for us, I think it was like 3 seasons ago we got a team set of uniforms and we've been using those ever since. But they're starting to wear down. The design's starting to get kind of old because everyone's seen it already so many times. So we
yeah.
like to try to keep things fresh. So hint hint for next season. Uh, but no, but in general, that's pretty much the biggest cost. But then there's also other things that, like, for example, when we play friendlies, sometimes there's a field cost there or referees for friendlies. In our case, like this season, halfway through the season, we had a little bit extra because we ended up keeping more players than we originally planned to. So we ended up registering the team in the local casual league, the Cobb Adult League. So that one was another cost. Um, as well as like staff costs. So some for certain things we um paying to have staff on to help us out. Um, so those things are the costs that we have to endure pretty much
And
season to
that's
season, and those costs have changed over time. We used to play like at a local field for our UPSL games, and it was like maybe I want to say we were paying like $180 for a game, and now for one game it's like $560. So it's gone up a
yeah.
lot, but that's also coming with the facility, you know, the stadium, the press box, the locker rooms, all of that is provided there. So it's an extra cost, but it's for us to have a better facility and a better game day experience.
And the thing that you mentioned, like, those are all the fundamental costs. Like, that's what it, like, the bare minimum to run a club. But if you want to be like, if you want to take another step and be above, like, stand out, and like, that's what we try to do. We try to grow every single time. We always say our goal is to win the World Cup of Clubs. And I mean, obviously that's not going to happen just by doing the bare minimum every time. So then we have other costs like the gym membership that we're doing. That's a big one this season. And then there's like small things here and there, like upgrading equipment, or like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a nice touch this season. We got custom corner flags, and like other things like jackets and training jerseys, stuff like that,
Yeah.
and pay like stuff for the live stream, like equipment for that, or like any subscriptions that we might be doing. Like
Our
those
website,
kind of
that's like
things.
one.
Yeah, our
Yeah,
website.
that's
Yeah.
another cost.
So those wouldn't be considered like bare minimum. They're not absolutely required, but those kind of things do separate the club from other clubs, I would say. And I mean, there's always room for improvement. I think there's a lot of things that we can continue doing, investing in for the club to get better. But that's going to come from finding other ways to bring in income, and yeah, we just got to be creative, basically. Try
Yeah,
to, because our goal, like, we don't want to be charging the players so much money. The
I
player fees that we have now, I don't think that we have any intention of raising that. So we're just trying to find in other ways to bring in income sources from outside places so we can continue to invest and grow the club that way.
yeah, and I was just gonna say that like our how much we charge the players has kind of gone up over the season, but we've kind of gone back and forth with how we've done it. When we first started, we were doing like a season fee, but then we were trying to like make it fair. So like if we had a player who we didn't think would get as many minutes, we would charge them less. And the players who were the starters, we would charge them more, and that didn't work at all.
Never.
Never worked. So
That
then
was. That was probably the worst
Yeah.
decision we tried.
And
I
then
think
we
that was my
switched,
idea too,
but
but
then we switched to doing it monthly. So it was like you could pay a fee every month to be a part of the club. And if you wanted to leave the club at any point, you could leave at any moment and you didn't have to pay for that month. And another person can come in that middle of that month and pay. But then we ended up like, but then when you're doing that, you're expecting a certain number of players. And what ended up what
yeah.
happening is when we got near the end of the season and we didn't have as many games or players got burnt out or whatever, and they would just stop paying, and then that's how we ended up in that negative that one season. So then we had to change it again, and now we're back to doing like that season fee, but it's the same for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're playing every game or not, because we're
Yeah.
trying to we're trying to because at this point we built up our reputation and stuff. And when we were doing the monthly fees, we ended up getting to the point where we were kind of like just making sure that we always had the right number of players so that we could cover the
And
cost, and
didn't think about quality.
the quality dropped
Yeah.
because of that.
And not only that, but like
Uh-huh.
the chemistry of the team
Yeah,
was
because it was
awful
always
because we
people
would have
coming in and out all the time.
yeah, you would meet new players and we'd be one of those teams where we're learning each other's names before kickoff, those kind of things. And
Right.
that's what we want to avoid. We want to not only be a serious club from the outside, but also a serious team that's competing. And part
Yeah.
of that is chemistry and building like I mean, what is it like MLS has like the 8 week preseason, stuff like that. Like they have their players set, they have them grow, train together, and be
Right.
100% by the time the season starts. So I
But
think
one thing,
that's also a big difference.
the other thing is though, is at this level though, it's not really realistic to say like we're gonna have a
Oh
one
yeah.
roster at the beginning of the season because
Yeah, of course.
everyone has their own personal lives and no one's this isn't anyone's job. So things are going to happen and people are going to leave and come in. So, but we've gotten to the
But
point where we've built up our reputation
yeah.
where we can be more selective. And we're not like, we have to have this many players in order to meet it. And that's why we went back to that like season fee so that we can know that we have the money up front. So we're not at the end of the tail end of the season and we're like, are we going to have enough to cover the costs, you know?
And it helps as the club too, like for us and I would say for the players environment as well, because our focus is less of how do we not go into debt, and our focus is more like we have that solved already first couple weeks of the season. Now the rest of the season is let's try to win. Like we can shift our focus, like what can we do to operate the club to win and not have to worry about money when we can have that figured out before the season. So, and I would say like you said, it's unrealistic to expect like we're gonna have this set roster, but the turnaround is definitely much less now when we have this model versus the monthly, because the monthly like we would have like a completely different team by the end of the season, and now it would be like maybe like five or more players like different. I mean, we'd have more coming in, but like only like a few leaving versus with the
Right.
monthly, it'd be like half the team.
Yeah, because if somebody's paying at the beginning of the season, if they're not, they're more likely to stay for the full season
Yeah.
than if they know, oh, I can just take a month off and come back the next month or anything
Yeah.
like that.
And
And then it like you said, it disrupts the momentum of the team and the chemistry because if you're training, and then all of a sudden half the team isn't training anymore because they're not paying that month, or the next month you have a completely different people in training, it just
Yeah.
completely disrupts everything. So I think that's something that we've kind of learned. We've gone like back and forth with how we do things for the financial part, but it's not just the financial part, but also like you said, the soccer part, and finding that balance between the two. How can we cover the financial part while not suffering on the soccer part?
Yeah. And I mean, we've done a lot of things to grow. This is my attempt at like a cheesy segue to the final topic, but we've done a lot of things to grow, and it's just like we want to keep moving forward step by step. But let's think long term for a bit and think like where do we see the club going, and what future do we want for the club?
I think that these last two seasons, since we brought in Coach Ignacio, um,
Hmm.
there's been a shift, I think, in terms of like the overall perception of the club. I think before we were always known as like, oh, they're the club who runs everything really well,
Yeah.
you know? And it's like, yeah, they also compete sometimes in the field,
We'll
you
get
know?
an upset here and there,
Yeah, exactly.
but
And it's like, oh, yeah, they'll always give you a good game, but they're going to do it with everything really well organized and they're always going to follow the rules and you're always going to have a good experience. But I think we're starting to kind of shift that. And now we're starting to kind of put our name like, oh, these guys are actually one of the top teams, not just in the organization, but also on the field and in the
Hmm.
games. And we've kind of shown that this season with our start of the season. Obviously, it's still a long way to go, so we'll see where it ends up. But that's kind of given us the motivation because after that fall season from 2022, when we did really poorly, and we decided to take that spring season off to kind of like re-evaluate things and kind of see. That was really what the question was. It was like, where do we see ourselves going from here? We just had
Yeah.
one of the worst seasons of our time, both on the field and off the field. Because
I
of the
mean,
way.
we had those conversations of literally asking like, what's the point of this club? Like,
Yeah,
why are we doing this? And we had to know the reason why, because there's no reason to continue doing something of this much effort if we're just doing it just to do it, just for like
right.
a little pastime or a hobby, but like genuinely know like what our motivations are. And we
Yeah,
had those conversations, and that's why we were able to kind of figure out what we needed to come back and why we wanted to come back.
and that's why we brought Ignacio in, and that's why it's been successful so far because we came back into the league with that mindset of we don't want to just be that team that can organize everything well and finish a season and always be consistently like in the league, because you see teams that come in and out because they don't have the organizational part of it to be
Yeah.
stay in the league. But we wanted to say, how can we get to that next level where we can compete for the league? And that's what we're trying to do right now. And I think that's because of how things have been going so far in these last two seasons, it's opening up that conversation for the next step, which is
Yeah.
what comes next. If we can
And
manage to win this league, if we can manage to get the attention of that we're a top club in the state, not just like a club that's run well, but a top club with that produces top talent and gets good results, what can that lead to? So that's kind of where the conversation is right now. And I don't want to say like too much because we have to wait and see like what opportunities present themselves. And that's kind of always been our mindset, you know.
yeah.
What opportunity presents itself? Do we have the resources? Do we have the people involved that we can take that step? So, I mean, you can kind of speak more on that too.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just kind of be blunt about it. I mean, the ultimate goal for the club is to, like we mentioned before, to win the World Cup of Clubs. And I mean, how do you get there? You have to be one of the best teams in the country. And how do you get there? You have to play in the top league in the country. And it's like, oh, well, how do you get there? And like so forth and so forth. So each thing is step by step. Obviously, we don't think we're going to win the World Cup of Clubs next year. We don't think we're going to do that in 10 years. Like that could even be something like maybe, and maybe I'm thinking too far ahead, but like generations like past us, you know what I mean? Like it's just it's step by step. Like that's basically we say that because we always want to keep improving no matter what.
Right.
We never want to be stagnant. We don't want to be the best team at this level and then be satisfied with that. And
Yeah.
then that's the end of the
And
season. The show ends. But it's like just kind of being bluntly like to get to that step. I mean, the next level above the fourth tier for US soccer is the third tier, which is professional level at that point. But the gap to go from where we were to UPSL was big. And the gap to get to UPSL to professional is like not even comparable, like how much bigger it is.
I,
So,
I think to just summarize it, I mean, you're when we started this club, you were 18 and I was
yeah.
21. Now you're 24 and I'm 27. And I don't think it's our plan to basically go like when you're 30, let's say you're 33 and you're ready to retire, just an example, or I'm ready
Hmm.
to retire, I'm not going to play anymore. I don't think that's our limit of we're saying, okay, we're not going to play anymore. We're
Yeah.
done with Potros. That was a fun project. Now let's move on with our lives. I don't think that's either one of our ideas right now. I think this is something that we want to dedicate our lives to. Like it's something that we see being a part of our life and something that we can build upon and be something that is bigger than just me and you.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like a way to summarize it. And now what that means, we just have to see what the future brings and what opportunities come
Exactly.
up.
Yeah. And like we've been we've had an offer to move to a division that's maybe more established and higher level before, but we talked about it and we were like, we cannot compete. We do not have the resources. The traveling would be too much. Like we could barely handle it. I think that was during the fall 22 season where like we were already struggling here. We were like, why are we trying to take the next step? So it's like, yes, we want to make it to that professional level eventually, but is now the right time? Obviously not. We do not have the resources for it. We don't have the experience. So we're just trying to grow where we can at this level to the point where we feel that we're ready to make that move. And if that means like just continuing to grind it out and do little things here or there, like that's what it's going to take. And I mean, just like putting it bluntly, like this podcast, this it's part of the reason like that we're doing this. We're trying to grow, we're trying to get more outreach. And if you're watching this, like thank you. I mean, we're already 46 minutes in, but like we're trying to get people to care about the club. We're trying to get people like, I mean, the internet is something that's like it's crazy, like the power of stuff like TikTok and YouTube, that you see clubs like hashtag United that they're like a random club in England. Well, obviously they had Spencer FC who already had a following, but like they have, or Wrexham even, like they have people all over the world that have never heard about this club, but through the power of social media, like they get the supporters that way. So right now, obviously we're tied to the Cobb County area, and that's the people who support us, and then like the families of the people that are abroad and stuff like that. But right now, I think the next step is trying to grow in this sense. And like I mentioned before, from a financial perspective, I mean, there's a lot more opportunity to bring in income, whether that's sponsors wanting to like utilize our exposure that we have and we can expose them, stuff like that, or even like finding ways to provide stuff like extra stuff to the community that if they want to support like at a small level, like through like I don't know, like a small donation or something, like, or even just by a comment or something, you know what I mean? So like these are the kind of things that like, yes, it's fun. That's also that's the top reason, like I'd say it's even, is I like talking about the club. You can ask my girlfriend, like I just constantly talk about it. I don't know if she zones out or not, but like I love talking about it, and if I have a reason to do it, obviously I'm going to do it. So like it's fun, and then also like this is also part of that next step.
I agree, and I think that this is the right time for it too, because I mean our live streams have been improving, our social media has been improving, but it wouldn't have made sense for it to improve how it is now 3 years ago, for example. You know, so
Yeah.
this is the right time, and hopefully it continues to keep moving in this direction because, like you said, it's fun.
Yeah. And like also similar to how we do everything in the club, like I mean, we upgraded our microphones, our cameras, we made sure we had the lighting right and everything. Like if we're gonna do a podcast, we're gonna do it right. We're
Yeah, and who's gonna be our first guest?
I don't know, I was thinking maybe Ignacio.
Yeah, I want to get Mr. Insane on here at one point.
And I think that episode should be dedicated just to the kind of things that he gets into.
Yeah, it doesn't have to do anything with goalkeeping or about the club or anything. It can just
No.
be all the other stuff.
Yeah, like I got a video from him saying that he kidnapped a turkey. That was how he started it off. So those kind of things. But yeah, I mean, I think we're at a good point. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or mention before we kind of wrap things up?
Just that I hope that the if anyone's still watching at this point, that you're still that you are excited to learn more about us and like all the stories that we have from. I mean, we've been doing this for 6 years now. This we're coming up on 6 years this summer, so we have so much that's gone on, and I think some people who haven't been around that long, they see us and they just maybe have one perspective of who we are and what we do, but I think it's really exciting to have this podcast to talk about these things that a lot of people who want to know about the club can get to know about us.
Yep. I'll just ditto what you said. I think it's exciting to just go into the weeds of things, because I mean, that's something that I don't see a lot of other clubs doing at a high level, is being kind of transparent and open about talking about these kind of things. And I guess I'll say it, if you watch this far, leave a comment about what you want us to talk about, what kind of questions you have, and that'll be kind of your reward for. We give you a cookie for staying this far. We'll answer your question. Like, I mean, and we want to be transparent. There's nothing that we want to hide or like keep like under the table or anything. Like, we just want to show what it took for us to be here and those kind of things. So
We want to tell our
yeah,
story.
something like that. Let's get that on a postcard. All right,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, thank you, Christopher, for joining me. I think I'll try to get you on as often as possible, but I know you have a busy schedule, so um, we'll see how often we do this. But yeah, no, stay tuned on our YouTube channel. You can see more content like this. You'll see some condensed versions as well. We'll try to clip things to get the most interesting information out there. I mean, we post highlights, we post reels, shorts, the TikToks, what these kids call it these days. We have like moments from the game, and then we'll have clips from the kind of things that we talk about that's exciting. But you know, stay tuned in our social media and our page, and a lot of exciting stuff to come. Thank you for listening.